Welcome, everybody, to Creators Corner, where we go behind the scenes to have great conversations with creators, artists, and designers and take a look at that board game industry that we all love. And I want to also say welcome aboard the Tabletop Express to Shem Phillips. Shem, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Shem, as I first and foremost look at your collection of games, I'm a big fan of many of them, and many of them fall into my Instabuy collection. But when I talk to anyone on this show, I always go back to the beginning. What was your origin in board games? What was the game that got you hooked on just playing games with friends, family, or whomever it might be?
Honestly, it's probably something like Cluedo. Like that's the honest truth. I grew up playing lots of games, or Clue as it's called, North America. So I grew up playing card games and classic board games, and that's really where my love for board games came from. But it wasn't until I was like in my early 20s, I'd already started designing a game, that I was introduced to modern board games like Catan and Carcassonne and stuff. So that was kind of, I guess, my re-entry into what we enjoy now, like modern tabletop games. Or it would have been the classic story of Catan, I guess.
Yeah, that one was a big one, even for me. And it's not my favorite now, but that was a big introduction for me back into as I kind of broke me into the modern world. So I owe a lot of respect to that particular game. But I think where I came into more awareness of a lot of your work, I know you designed a lot of games since 2009, but it was really Shipwrights that got you on the scene for a lot of people. And I'm wondering, for you, when you go back to Shipwrights, what was that experience like, and what lessons did you learn from the Shipwrights Kickstarter experience?
Oh, so many. I actually designed Shipwrights probably maybe 2 years before it went on Kickstarter. So it was one of my first games I ever designed. But I always knew that I wouldn't be able to produce it through my normal means, which was like more hobby kind of kit set style making games here in New Zealand. And it wasn't until Kickstarter came here that I was ever like able to use it. So I honestly I put that campaign up. Thought I'll print 500 copies. I'll hopefully sell 200. I'll just send them out from New Zealand. No one's going to be interested anyway, but I'll just make a few games. So I was like pleasantly and horrifiedly surprised when it actually did quite well on Kickstarter. I think I had to print 1,300 copies for the first print run. So it was, yeah, it was a bit of a shock, and I had no idea that there was this huge like market of people out there who just browse Kickstarter to buy games. So the lessons I was learning was like I was like a week behind schedule constantly, like trying to do these new things called stretch goals I've never heard of, dream them up on the spot and test them as quickly as possible, and it was nuts. I think I ended up losing tons of money in that first campaign, and then slowly made it back throughout the next 2 or 3 years. But yeah, it was great. It was good. In a way, it's like an investment into marketing for my brand anyway. So yeah, so much I learned.
Oh, I can only imagine, especially the first time you get on there. What is the advice you give to those first time Kickstarter creators? Because obviously, having been there and gone through quite the lesson yourself, I'm sure you've got a lot of wisdom to share.
Usually it's like case by case. So if someone shows me they've got this huge game that they want to put on Kickstarter, it's their first game, and I can see the graphic design might not be as good as it could be. You kind of like just try and tell them just a bit more cautious. Take your time, don't bite off more than you can chew. Maybe start with something small. But sometimes you see the ones which is like, oh, they've got a really quality product, like a really slick little card game or something. The art looks great, and like I'm often surprised at how well it does because I'm thinking, oh, that's too small. It's not going to do that well. So it's really hard to know. Even with the experience that you get from doing these Kickstarters, you still get surprised by which ones do well, which ones don't. So usually I just tell them like, just be prepared. You may lose money on your first campaign. No matter how well you budget or plan for it, something's going to come out that you didn't expect. So make sure you're not like putting your mortgage or your house at risk or something with this campaign. Make sure you've got a full-time job or something to help at least support this endeavor of publishing, I guess. Yeah.
When you think about Kickstarter, how much has it changed for you since then? What's been the biggest difference you see in either how you use it or how you see other people using Kickstarter?
There's a way bigger entry now, I think. So that first Shipwrights campaign, I had no video at all. So there's no review videos, no written reviews or anything. So it was purely just like the images I put up, and I think I had the rulebook up. That's all that it was to drive it. So I wouldn't be able to get away with that now. You've got to have reviewers like showing your games. You got to have like quality kind of presentation of what you're selling. So yeah, it's I don't envy people who are trying to start now. I'm privileged enough to now have a bit of a following that I can like put up a simple campaign and still get a bunch of people looking at it. So now it's changed a lot. I think people. Well, I personally have gone off stretch goals quite a bit because they're often I perceive them as being kind of fake hype because the company often knows how well it's going to go, so they may as well just give it from the start. But yeah, there's new things I'm seeing, like they've got the social stretch goals and more kind of community based things to try and plug and build that kind of hype, I guess, as they need. So just seeing more creative ways of doing campaigns more recently. Like Roxley Games do some really cool stuff. Yeah, so I don't know. It's still like feels quite niche and small, and like there's lots of ways you can kind of be creative in that space. Don't just follow the mold. Is probably what I'd encourage people. Don't think you have to do all the stretch goals all the time and copy every other campaign that's gone. So just be creative and engage with your community. I think is the key, really.
I think you hit the nail on the head for me with the engage with the community, because the Kickstarters I find most successful are the ones that there's not this negative feedback that they're not talking to us, they're not communicating.
Yeah.
And one thing that you do really well is communicate. You're even active. You're active on Twitter, active in a lot of places. How important for you is just that overall engagement outside of just Kickstarter, but overall, and just being kind of present in the space as someone that people can really be in touch with? I mean, even just as an example, I reached out to you and you got back to me probably within, I'd say, 24 hours to say, yeah, I'd love to come on. And to me, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's different for others. Like if you're working full time and you're trying to do a publishing company on the side, that's a bit different. It's hard to be engaged, like I guess as much as I would be, because this is what I do. Sit at my computer and answer emails all day, so and try and make up games. But no, it's important to me. I think it helps remind you that everyone at the end of the email, end of whatever the chat is a human being that's trying to enjoy your product and trying to like get the answers they need. So trying to get back to people usually within 24 hours is quite easily done. So I get frustrated when I deal with like bigger companies. I'm like, I send an email, it's been like a week and you've heard nothing. Like, are you not opening your email, bro? Like, are you not looking at your email client at all? Because I'm checking mine all throughout the day. So it kind of baffles me a bit why some people won't reply. But
Well, one thing I do also notice with you is obviously you got a plan, because as we watch the trilogies, the trilogies of games that you've put out with Raiders and now Architects, you're putting out these great base games, but the expansions obviously had this tremendous value that seems to fit really well with what you did. What is your process there in building out a game? Where does the expansion design come into play? Because as I've talked to people, they've all got these different processes where the expansion is an idea that they know they want to do later. Others, the expansion comes later on in the process after they've done the base game. How does it fit for you?
So it's usually always been like an afterthought. So like the Raiders ones, for example, I had no ambition to do expansions at all. So I was never really a fan of expansions when I first started in the hobby. So with Raiders, that was very much like, well, there's a ton of demand for this, and it's getting all this kind of new attention. So I guess the challenge was for me. I think I'd done Explorers at that point, and I was like, well, what's next? I don't know what to do next. Maybe I'll do some expansions for Raiders because everyone likes that game. So I think I designed Hall of Heroes, and then I was thinking, that would be like the March Kickstarter for next year. I got to like maybe July or August. I was like, well, I've got all this time. I'll do another expansion. May as well just try it. So it made Fields of Fame. So that was like my first kind of foray into expansions. And then, so Architects, that was always an afterthought. Although when we designed Architects, we thought this goes well at 6. There probably will be a 6-player expansion. We don't know what it will be. So we put like 5+ on like the slots for the players to put their pieces, because that might be 6. So that was more just like pre-planning rather than having an idea. Paladins was definitely an afterthought. We had no plans at all for an expansion, but people kind of become to like, I guess, expect expansions, at least in the West Kingdom kind of stuff and North Sea. For Viscounts, that one's a bit different because in the past we'd put the game out there and wait for feedback. So we'll wait to see what do people like and not like about the game, what do they want to see more in the game, and we'll try and take that feedback and put it into the expansions. So with Raiders, people were saying, oh, there's not enough ways to get iron, so you can't get enough armor. So Hall of Heroes kind of addresses that a bit, and the other feedback was that the raids don't feel exciting. They don't feel like there's risk or anything. So Fields of Fame kind of answered that bit of feedback. Whereas for the expansion we're working on for Viscounts, we already designed it before the game came out. So there's like no feedback from players. We don't know what they want in the game. But as we're still developing it, we're kind of listening now to that feedback that's coming in now and just making sure that we're kind of addressing that. But yeah, usually it's just after. We're like, well, we'll make the game, put it out there, see what people think. They will work on expansion if people want it. So,
did you ever imagine you'd be talking about doing all these different series of games? Because Raiders of the North Sea, obviously, it got so much tremendous attention, and I think rightfully so. It's one of the few boxes I have that has everything combined. I bought that box. But did you expect when you created that you'd be doing an Architects of the West or the additional games in the series that you have now come to be doing?
So I did Shipwrights, and then there was just the feedback from people saying, like, we like the game, we want to use the ships for raiding or do something. So that kind of got me thinking, oh, maybe I can do a game about raiding. And I just started watching the Vikings history show and stuff. So that was all very fresh. And then for whatever reason, I just figured 3 games, a trilogy makes more sense than 2 games. So that's why I did Explorers. And then that's when it started clicking, like, well, I've got the North, maybe there's the West or the South or the East. And I was doing all sorts of things, like maybe I'll do a trilogy in like the Wild West and just change the time period completely and stuff, or the East Empire or Dynasty or whatever. So I had that kind of idea, I guess, of maybe another trilogy, but it wasn't until Sam McDonald showed me his first prototype for Architects that I was like, all right, this is definitely the Franks. We're doing architecture, so exciting, but it's what the French are known for a lot, is the amazing cathedrals and all sorts. So that's kind of where we committed to doing. Let's do West Kingdom. These are all going to be games in that kind of medieval sword and shield era. And now obviously we're like committing to doing 4 trilogies. So that's like the rest of my like 9 to 10 years of my life kind of booked up for those. But that's going to be fun.
Can I talk a little bit to you about just getting Garfield games out there? You started in 2009 and obviously it's grown significantly since then. What has that been like, really, not just creating and getting your games out there, but helping others get their games out there? And what has that meant for you personally?
So I spent the first 6 years just making games like a hobby. So I would I had a die cutter, so a little machine that lets you punch out cards the same shape every time. So I bought one of those for, I guess it would have been about $100 online. And I used to make all these little card games myself by getting them printed locally and then cutting them out myself, putting a sticker on the box, chucking in a rule book, and then selling them to friends or whoever wants them. And I would never print like more than 100 copies. They're basically prototypes when I look back, but I was selling them as games. But basically at cost price for me because it was so expensive to make at that quantity. But so that was kind of my I guess where I came from for the first 6 years, was just learning to make games and learning how not to make games and what I like in design and kind of learning on the job, I guess. And it wasn't until I was kind of thrown into that spotlight a bit with Shipwrights and stuff that suddenly I was like, oh, there's more demand, and there's, suddenly I have to make these games at a certain level that people expect. I can't just like, that's cool, let's chuck that out the door, that's another game, next game, move on. So yeah, the things I learned was like, I guess I've really kind of given myself a higher quality to try and reach for in my design. That helps a lot with co-design with Sam McDonald because we kind of spur each other on to like make a better game. But for people starting out, I think the key is just make a game that you want to play. I think is the simple advice. Like just have fun making games. Not every game has to be published. Not every game has to sell, tens of thousands of copies or whatever. Just have fun making games, and then if something comes of it, then that's just an added bonus. Yeah.
And one of the games I know that Garfield Games is putting out, and I'm very excited about it, is Hadrian's Wall. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about where the origin of this one came from. In particular, I think this one is exciting for a lot of people because a lot of people like roll and write games. A lot of people like flip and write games. But this is probably the most, I don't know if it's the right word to say advanced, but the most in-depth roll and write game or flip and write style game that I have seen. And I think it just makes me really excited. I know I'm not alone in the board game community in thinking that. So I'd love to hear more about the origins of that and how that came to be in your hands.
So I yeah, I had like toyed with the idea of doing like some sort of roll and write for like maybe Raiders or something. Just try something different. But then that kind of it bugged me that it's like I'm just jumping on the train of everyone else who's like doing this, the bandwagon or whatever. Like everyone's doing roll and writes. I don't want to do that. But then my friend Bobby, who's part of my local game group and also my local design group, he brought this game to our design meetup, and I played it, and I was like, "This is really good. Like this feels like our kind of game." So I just kind of said it, just like, "Oh, I'd publish this. This is definitely my kind of game." And then from there, we basically were like, "Let's just do this. This is a really cool game. Let's make it together." So it was all his concept, all his idea. He had been falling in love with with Rolling Lights and Flippin' Fills. And one game that really stood out was Fleet the Dice game, because that was a bit meatier, more crunchy decisions, and the kind of the combo-tastic nature of it. So he set out to make this game. I think in one of those meetups, someone was talking about walls in a game, like building walls in a game mechanically, whatever it was. And he just, because he's British, he was like, has anyone made a game about Hadrian's Wall? And we'd never heard of the wall because we're all local Kiwis. So he educated us, and then he was really inspired to make a game about Hadrian's Wall, because it's come from his homeland and all that. So he set out to make this game, and he just wanted to make a roll and write because he was like so in love with that kind of genre at the time. But I think his ambition was, let's make this really heavy. So it started out for him like on 2 big sheets of paper, each for each player. And I had to basically take that, condense it down to fit what would fit inside our classic box size, and then give that to my brother to then illustrate with his style. So it was a lot of fun. It was a hard project to kind of like to make the product to fit that many little boxes on little sheets of paper. But no, it's turned out really great. It gives me a vibe of like playing Paladins, because you're like, I'll do this, I get to do that. Oh, I'll do this, and I'll do that. So it kind of has that chaining all throughout the game, but various kind of paths you can follow strategically. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed one thing that you did, obviously, was you provided kind of the designer's blog to it, which I thought had a lot of insight into it. And one thing that you mentioned, of course, is Sam doing the art. What's it like to kind of be able to work with, your brother and because I think about, there's a lot of great husband-wife teams and brother or sibling teams out there in a lot of industries, but I don't know as many in the board game industry. So I'm wondering, how is that experience for you, and how much fun is it to kind of work with your brother and make something that's fun? I mean, really, that's what it is in the end. It's fun.
We've always wanted to make stuff together. So he's my older brother by 2 years. He was always amazing at art growing up, and I was always terrible at art. So he would like be drawing his own comics and making his own Simpson cartoon characters and all that kind of stuff. And I was trying to copy him to be cool. But he, we did like t-shirt brand together. We've done, we worked at a factory together. We've done all these sort of little creative projects that we've done along the way. He's illustrated like art covers for my old bands back in high school and stuff. So we've always enjoyed working creatively. We're quite similar personality wise, but it works out great. We both work from our own homes, and just, it's pretty simple. He's a hard worker, so don't have to chase him up. No, it's really good. So it's cool just to be able to see like him using his skills and making these products. Yeah. And
then for you, I have to ask, the art. Obviously, the art in all your games, I think it stands out. Every game really that I've seen from Garfield Games has this high quality to it. How important is art design to you from a board game perspective now here in 2021?
Well, if a game just looks ugly as, I don't want to play it usually. I'll get past it if I've heard it's a great game, but often it's like, if it doesn't look great, like it's all just tan colors and boring tones, I don't really want to look at it. And I think a lot of people probably feel the same way. But that's just me. I'm visual, and I'm all about the kind of the I guess analytical stuff and logic behind the game. So those are the 2 things that I kind of need in a game, is the thinkiness and then the visuals. So I guess that's why it kind of comes through in our brand a bit as well.
Yeah, and I don't want to keep you too much longer, but just a few more questions I do want to ask. One of the most important things I think in board games is that board games are fun. And that's really why we make games, or we play games, or we design the art for games, whatever role and anyone listening to this is. For you, what is a game that stands out that's just a lot of fun that you've played recently? That not one of your own per se, but just one that's you've had a great time with.
So there's a few. More recently, Calico was a lot of fun. Even just solo, just the puzzle was so fun. And I've been playing a lot of Kingdom Rush as well. Actually, two-handed solo. That
Nice.
was again. It's the you get in those tense moments of like, oh, how am I going to figure out this puzzle? So I always enjoy the puzzles. That's kind of the fun factor for me. I don't need a lot of interaction in games, but just that trying to figure out the solution, I always really enjoy. Which is probably why Pandemic's like one of my favorite games of all time because it's a puzzle you're trying to figure out. Yeah.
I got to echo what you said about Kingdom Rush. It's so much fun. I play that with my son, and
Oh, cool.
I back that. And my son, who's 7, absolutely, I love it, and he doesn't know he's thinking. And that's one of the things I talk about. That games are a great educational tool. Look, before I let you go, I do have one important question to ask you, and you've answered this to some extent already, but I want to make it official. As you talk to those out there who are looking at the board game industry and saying, I want to do something. I want to, whether it be design a game or I want to do art for a game. What is the advice you tell them on how to get involved or how to get going? I get a sense part of it is you got to just start doing, but I'd love to hear kind of what advice you would give those folks.
Yeah, for sure. It's just like just try it, just do it. But often, if you don't know how to connect with the community, that's more the challenge. So a lot of cities now will have, or at least areas in the world, will have design groups of some sort. So even in New Zealand, we've got like 2 or 3 around the country, and we're a small country of like whatever it is, 7 million people. So if you're in the States especially, there's going to be some kind of design group in your city probably of designers and artists meeting up to work on their games, test their games. So I would probably say just go and find those people because they're going to have all this experience and knowledge to help you and to give advice on what you're working on. So yeah, it's hard to do it by yourself.
Yeah. I do want to say that I want to thank you again for coming on and chatting with me today. Really appreciate your insights and more of your background. I also want to, of course, encourage if you enjoyed this Creators Corner segment for the Tabletop Express, give me a like and a subscribe, and we'll have a lot more of these coming. We've got a bunch of them coming up, and I'm very excited about those next few. I also want to give you a chance to share if there's anything that you're up to or anything you're really excited about right now, or even if you just want to give a shout out to just another designer or who out there who you think deserves some love right now.
Always Sam McDonald. He always deserves love. My co-designer. We've got a Kickstarter coming up in about 8 days, I think, for the expansion for Paladins, which is called City of Crowns. So that's our next kind of big thing. And Hadrians is pre-orders are starting to ship out for that now, and you'll see it in retail probably late March, April, I think. But you can find us at all the usual at Garfield games and all the kind of social media sites as well.
And I will put all the links for Garfield Games in the description on YouTube, so you can take a look for it there. And I definitely highly encourage you to go check it out. I do want to, again, say thank you for your time today. And for all of those you watching, thank you for tuning in live. I would like to take this time to welcome you aboard the Tabletop Express and hope you have a great day. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.